Hello and welcome all. Thank you so much for making time to come and join this conversation hosted by Wellbeing Economy Cymru. We are the Wales hub of the Global Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and we're a group of activists and organisers who believe that the well-being of people and planet should be the driving force behind our economic system, and that our economic activity should serve and promote the well-being of people and local places and nature and the planet, rather than the pursuit of GDP growth and other completely crazy metrics. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance believes that there are better ways to value and judge success, and that's what the Wellbeing Economy movement is all about across Wales and around the world. And we feel like the wellbeing economy is happening here in Wales. From the grassroots in communities and organisations up and down the country, people are thinking differently and working differently and creating a new way of living and working in alignment with the goals of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which sets out a great framework for thinking about what we mean when we talk about a wellbeing economy for Wales. It's an economy that serves those 7 well-being goals. It's a holistic way of looking at what we're all trying to achieve in our work and in our communities and businesses. So well-being economics is happening, it's emerging, and it's strengthening with the work of change makers and pioneers and people and organisations across Wales. So we're really excited to bring together the wellbeing economy movement from across Wales every month in forums like this to consider different themes and topics which we believe are drivers of the wellbeing economy and which deserve some curiosity and exploration to think how can different sectors of our economy and different facets and aspects of our lives be reframed and thought about differently in trying to create wellbeing economics for Wales and beyond. And as part of an international movement, we're delighted always in these forums to welcome people from around the world as well as from across Wales. But our focus very much is how can we work together across Wales to strengthen wellbeing economics for the wellbeing of our people, our environment and our future generations. Tonight we're talking about tourism, which of course is a huge economic driver for Wales, one of our largest sectors, touches all of our lives in various ways. We haven't seen you guys in one of these forums since July because we took August off, and of course we're all now back at our desks after the holiday season, and so perhaps there's plenty to reflect on when we're talking about Welsh tourism. How was this summer season for you, for your community, for your organisation? What were your reflections as you enjoyed your summer in Wales or elsewhere? And please, we're looking forward to hearing from people in the room who wish to share reflections on any of that in this evening's forum. And to what extent did you feel that tourism this year served the well-being of your local places and your community and your environment? And what were the challenges that need addressing? So enough from me. I'd like to welcome our panel of speakers this evening and get into some more expert insights on this topic of the importance of tourism to Wales, the need to kind of grow the sector from an economic development perspective, but how we balance that with ensuring that tourism drives well-being and the well-being economy for Wales. And the first of our guests this evening, I'm really delighted to welcome Nigel Morgan. Now, Nigel is a Professor of Social Sustainability at the University of Surrey's School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and he researches the connections between inclusion, social justice and the visitor economy. And he's an expert in all of this and will help provide some context. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. Can I hand over to you? What do you think is a realistic and achievable path forward for Welsh tourism?
Diolch yn fawr, Dawn. Nosferatu pawb. Welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen because I have a few slides just to help with my talk this evening, and I'm hoping that you can see. Yes, hopefully that works. Um, so First slide, just a little bit about myself. Dawn has already done an introduction. So yes, I'm really interested in social sustainability, which is often one of the neglected parts of the kind of sustainability pillars, if you like. People often talk about the environment, they talk about the economy, but they often forget about social sustainability, and that's really what I'm particularly interested in. In terms of where I'm coming from, and my perspective, I guess, is that if tourism doesn't work for local communities, and if tourism doesn't work to promote well-being and human flourishing, then it's not working. In terms of talking through this evening, hold on a second. Here we go. Hopefully this works. So I thought I would, as I'm first of the panelists, I thought might be useful to maybe set the scene for other people to then layer the kind of the detail and the nuances, really. So maybe taking the sort of stance that maybe people in the room are not that familiar with tourism and how it fits within the Welsh context. I thought I would, start with some very general, context and comments, really. Wales, I guess, faces a lot of challenges which are fairly common to small destinations around the world. We've got fairly low awareness amongst international consumers, media and travel trade. And I think that's something that we would all recognize. On top of that, also, we're, as a small destination, we've got a relatively small destination management organization in Visit Wales. It's got a relatively small staff and a relatively small budget. So whatever we do, we have to leverage the resources that we do have very effectively. One of the challenges really that we've constantly had, and the figures have been fairly static for quite some time, actually, well over 20 years, is that although we're a constituent country of the UK, which itself is in the top 10 globally as a destination, we have been unable to capitalize really on that UK appeal. And we only attract roughly about 2% of the UK's overseas visitors, which is significantly below, our Celtic competitors in particular. That's not to say that we haven't always tried to attract overseas visitors, and Visit Wales and the predecessor Wales Tourist Board have consistently recognized the value of overseas tourists, but have struggled really to attract this market. And there's recently been a couple of inquiries in the last decade, one of which was in 2022, both by the Senedd and by the Westminster government, into the promotion of Wales as a global destination. And although those inquiries are very wide-ranging, one of the consistent things that's come up is how we build a kind of resonating brand identity for Wales as an international destination. Dawn sort of prefaced the seminar and the session tonight by saying it's a key economic driver. I thought I'd give you a few headline figures around that. We have very tourism reliant regions and communities in Wales, and one of the key indicators and the sort of sound bites that I often use is that a place like Anglesey is actually more dependent on tourism than Blackpool. somewhere that we traditionally associate with tourism. It's also more important to Wales, actually, than the agricultural industries or the automotive industries, but probably doesn't get its share of media coverage or its kind of share of voice, really, in policy circles. Certainly, those two industries are probably much better at lobbying for resources than the tourism industry, which tends to be quite fragmented and, as I'll say in a moment, actually composed largely of micro businesses. Tourism is, I've spent, I don't like to think about it, but close to 30 years actually working and talking about tourism in various capacities, more than that, actually. It's a hugely important industry for an economy like Wales because it's an indigenous sector. You can't up roots with tourism and relocate to another country, such as perhaps in Eastern Europe or elsewhere in the world. It's an engine of the economy that drives indigenous businesses here in Wales. And it's a critical way in which we transfer wealth from central, often wealthier urban areas to more peripheral, rural and seaside communities. And it's also crucially composed of micro businesses, not even SMEs, family businesses, which reduces economic leakage, tends to boost local supply chains and supports local services. It's also a disproportionately important employer for women, for Black and ethnic minority groups, and for young people in Wales. So where does Wales sit in the kind of global sort of picture at the moment? Well, the global trends in tourism terms are moving towards more personalized services. Consumers are looking for this word authenticity, which academics spend a lot of time talking about, but what perhaps we can talk about what we think that means in Wales later on. They're increasingly looking for sustainable experiences, not just in terms of infrastructure and environment, but sustainability in a much broader sense. And I'm sure Ian will say quite a lot about well-being as well. And of course, the world is aging. So in terms of tourists, older travelers are increasingly dominating. But what we're finding in tourism terms is that age is very much just a number, not a guide to behavior. And the sorts of things that people were traditionally doing in their kind of 60s, people are maybe doing in their 70s today. So, we're finding a lot of very active and engaged older people. I'm not going to go through all of these, but there's definitely a sense that tourists are looking for off the beaten track experiences. They're curious to engage with authentic communities. They're looking for local food. They're trying to reconnect with nature and travel. And they're interested in local experiences. And, I think Wales is very well placed to deliver all of those kinds of experiences. Wales Tourist Board and now Visit Wales in particular are very much looking to try and attract adventure seekers, particularly from the southeast of England and London, which is traditionally quite an affluent region and also geographically quite close to Wales by comparison, for instance, with Scotland. So, can we try and bring in people from the Midlands, from Manchester and Liverpool into North Wales, from London into South and West Wales? Just to throw out some challenges which we might want to think about where Wales is not doing that well and hasn't for some time, is that we've traditionally had less money spent here per visitor head, than the GB average. And there's a whole host of reasons behind that. We don't tend to have very large chain hotels. which, you know, could be a strength as well as a weakness. But one of the issues we do have is that tourists to Wales don't tend to book that far in advance, which means that we're more vulnerable to trips being cancelled at the last minute, particularly due to weather and other issues. If you can encourage tourists to book further out, they're more likely to actually come and honour those bookings because clearly they've paid for them. So that's an issue for us. We also are not very good at staying and holidaying in Wales as Welsh people. Compare ourselves with the Scots, who take 60% of all domestic tourism trips actually in Scotland. We are quite low in terms of that. And as a South Walian married to a North Walian, I find, you know, an awful lot of people from South Wales have never been to North Wales and have got no idea what North Wales has got to offer. So I think we've got a challenge really to encourage Welsh people to stay a little bit more local. Not going to go into all of this, but if you want to have share the slides later, you can have a look at them. But I had a go this afternoon at doing a bit of a kind of SWOT analysis. We've got some great things going for us here in Wales: dark skies, coastal path, fantastic culture. We speak Welsh and English, so we're bilingual. We've got that, which is a real appeal for international tourists. But we have a range of challenges. We have poor connectivity. We've got low visitor awareness. We've got a lack of icons, poor retail offer, arguably, and a range of other challenges. So I'm just almost done. I just wanted to finish with just 3 slides, just setting out the sorts of things that maybe we can talk about in the evening. How do we move forward? Again, lots on the slide. I'm not going to talk about them all. Trying to encourage young people to move into tourism. Tourism has got a real image issue, and perhaps Anka might say a little bit about this. It's often seen as being a poor, low-wage economy, no career structure. How do we get our young people into tourism? As somebody who's worked in tourism all my life and then gone on to teach and research tourism, I would very much counter that by saying you can have a fantastic career in tourism. How do we inspire community development through tourism? How do we promote the concept of slow travel, well-being, and do all of that by supporting local supply chains and protecting the environment and our cultural and linguistic character? We have got some research here in Wales which suggests that the industry is a bit skeptical of going green. Bigger businesses tend to engage more in the green agenda in Wales than SMEs in tourism terms. If you are a family or a micro business, you have very limited time to spend on training and very little money to spend on resources for training. There's a real opportunity for Wales to build on its strengths and look at its potential as a sustainable destination, but this is going to take support, and it's going to take much more engagement and joined up policy. So just to conclude, I personally think the way forward for Wales has got to be through community partnerships. We know that money is very tight at government, local authority level. We don't necessarily have to throw money at a problem to solve it. There are other ways to try and grow entrepreneurship, to try to connect with culture, heritage, language, and natural environment here in Wales. We've definitely got to try to encourage tourists to stay longer, to look at ways in which, I know it's not all about money, but to try and find ways for tourists to actually put money into the local economies of Wales. One of the anecdotal things that I often hear about is we don't have authentic, high quality souvenirs that are made here in Wales. How do we connect our thriving crafts into a supply chain so that international visitors can actually purchase Welsh products, which then creates a much more sustainable economy here in Wales? How do we connect and reduce food miles so that tourists can actually, eat locally bought fish rather than perhaps eating French fish, which is caught and then, supplied back into Wales, whereas Welsh catch is then served up in France? To me, that always sounds completely mad. And how do we get residents involved so that they understand how tourism can work for them? Because I think there's also a kind of communication challenge that people don't necessarily see the benefits of tourism for local communities. I think we can formalize sustainability and decarbonisation as a real strength to become a sustainable destination, but we've got to put effort and time and resources into actually doing that. That's been very quick. I covered a lot of ground, but I realize that time is very tight. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. And hopefully that stimulated some ideas for later in the meeting.
Diolch, Nigel. Yes, it certainly has. And there's plenty of conversation already going on in the chat in response to lots of what you were saying, which was a really great content-rich presentation. So thank you so much for that. And we will circulate the slides if that's all right with you. But you've raised some really great foundations for this evening's discussion. Not least where you started from, which is our economic dependence on tourism and its impact for families and micro businesses and women and ethnic minorities. It's such an important sector. And then, from a well-being economy perspective, I think your points about involving local communities and what we might call community-led tourism, I think are well made. And, Wales is huge strengths and opportunities to position itself as a well-being tourism destination, a green, eco-friendly, nature-loving, nature-rich and environmentally regenerative and respectful tourism sector could be our USP, and there seems to be a huge opportunity for that. But I won't say any more. Thank you so much, Nigel. Really thought-provoking and a great start. I'll come to our second panelist. Thank you so much, Kerry Huntington. Now, Kerry, I think what you're doing picks up on some of these themes around community involvement and people locally feeling a real sense of ownership over their own tourism economy. Kerry is from Cwmni Cymunedol Bro Ffestiniog, where he is working to connect local partners, I think, to work together to develop tourism around Blaenau Ffestiniog. Kerry, thank you for being here. We'd love to hear some more about your work and what you think is the way forward for well-being economy tourism here in Wales.
Diolch yn fawr, Don. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen now as well, so hopefully, can everyone see this? No?
Yeah.
Can get share screen. Okay.
Yeah, that's coming up now. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, my name's Kerry Cunnington, and I work for a social enterprise in North Wales, Blaenau Ffestiniog, called Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog. It's like an umbrella or a parasol enterprise, we like to call it, because it's always sunny in Blaenau Ffestiniog, as you know. And it's like 15 social enterprise, and tourism is very important to the local economy here, as you know. So for those of you who don't know where Blaenau Ffestiniog is, it's that blue spot there in the middle of the Snowdonia National Park. We're not actually in the national park. We're the whole in the national park, apparently, but we like to think ourselves of the whole of the national park. But as you see, we're quite far away from the traditional economic heartlands like Bangor, Carnarvon, and all the tourist hotspots, if you like, Llandudno, Colwyn Bay, Penllyn, Harlech, Barmouth. So not traditionally you would call a traditional tourist destination, but there has been tourism happening in the area for a while. So this is Blaenau Ffestiniog. In Welsh, we call it the Breichlet o Dref ar Asgwrn y Graig, which is the, doesn't translate as well, that's a bracelet of the town. Bracelet of a town on the bone of the mountains. So the mountains circulate, sorry, I'm thinking Welsh and translating into English. The mountains kind of protect us or isolate us, but I like to think of them as protecting us. It's a beautiful town. It had a population of 15,000 during the Industrial Revolution, now it's down to about 5,000. So we are dependent on tourism to some extent. It's probably one of the highest employers in the town. We do have a plastics factory and a hydropower station. So we are still creating wealth in the area. That's what I'm trying to say. And this is why we're looking at tourism as a driver for community development and economic development. So I talk about Ffestiniog, a social enterprise we established back in 2007, but started trading in 2012. The Tourist Information Centre closed in the centre of town, and we came together as a community to purchase it. And we did this in 2004 through not a grant, but a loan from the Community Investment Fund at the time, I think. So the idea was that we had a community information centre in the centre of town, and we were welcoming tourists into the town, but on our own terms, if you like. So in this tourist information centre, which is now a cafe as well, it's thriving. There is no bus timetable or electric or a digital bus timetable. You have to ask Uncle Day or John when the next bus is to Porthmadog or the next train to Llandudno. So you're soon integrated into the community and you become a member of the community while you're there for the visit. It's a community, it was a catalyst in a way. It's a community space, and it shows confidence and ambition and our pride in our town. So I know I haven't got long, so cut a long story short, we saw tourism happening around us in Blaenau Ffestiniog. Figures were bandied around earlier about how much it's worth to the local area and how much it employs. I think it's 18,000 or 20,000 in Northwest Wales or Gwynedd. That's the same. But where is that wealth going? That's the question we're always asking. Okay, there's this figure branded about how much it's worth to Wales and the local economy and how much jobs it's creating, but actually we're not seeing that wealth within our communities. We're not seeing that money, so we need to follow that money, or we need to take ownership of our tourism offer. So we've done this over the last few years, and we've started working with local young people, raising awareness about our activities, training in the tourism sector, and so that's where we've been trying to raise awareness locally. So anyway, in 2012, we had money from Welsh Government to develop mountain bike trails in the area. Blaenau is perfect for mountain bike trails, so it was the first kind of downhill mountain bike centre in the UK. So for those of you who don't know, it's like skiing. You pay for a day pass, and you get a lift to the top of the mountain, and you ride your bike down, and then you do this all day, and they pay £50 for the pleasure. So this was based in Llechwedd Slate Quarry. So you can see the picture there to the right. The views of the area are stunning. So it's been a massive success. So the revenue we've created from the mountain bike centre has gone back into local facilities, which I'll talk about later on. But what happened on the site was we came there as a social enterprise, saw the potential of the site, developed it as a mountain bike centre, used local people to build it, local knowledge, local people working there, all that kind of stuff. But it became a true catalyst for Zip World and Surf Snowdonia and the adventure tourism revolution in the area. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think that is really worth further discussion. And let's talk about quickly the adventure tourism revolution, the old mainstream, if you like. Blaenau Ffestiniog and Northwest Wales has been branded as this adrenaline-packed adventure playground, if you like. but it's a narrow view of adventure as we look at it. It's quick, adrenaline-centered, and the infrastructure they've created, is very energy-intensive, with adventure parks like Surf Snowdonia, which is now closed, and Zip World maybe intruding on natural areas. So we're not making the best of our actual natural resources, and it's all about jobs, 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 jobs. And the local culture at a stunning and rich backdrop, not central to the actual activity or offer. That's what I would debate. Okay, so the new mainstream. Well, Gwynedd County Council are launching their new Wellbeing Sustainable Visitor Economy framework on Monday in Plas Tanabulch, and we've been invited to the table for the first time for this kind of discussion, which has been really good. But the KPIs and the indicators are mind-blowing. There are 60 indicators, but at last they're looking at tourism as a whole and the effect it has as a whole, from services to jobs to the environment. But is it a bit too much? We're not sure. Time will tell. It's a great strategy, as Wales are brilliant at doing strategies, but it's actually actioning them strategies that will be the challenge. And the problem is, there's no critical discussion around Zip World or this kind of development. Are they unrealistic goals about integrating community, industry and environment? Priorities will have to be made. And how do we deal with these 60 indicators? The risk is there are too many indicators and it will just become a talking shop, and we won't be getting to the key of the hub of the discussion or what we're trying to do. But the opportunities are vast. There's a way of collective ownership, a visitor economy that promotes local ownership, supports local supply chains and produce, which was talked about earlier. But how do we get there? So I'll talk about Blaenau Ffestiniog quickly, and Gwynedd, and some of the work we're doing at the moment. So this is our we are working now, we're using tourism as a lever to develop properties on the high street and working with the local community. And I really like this quote from 2022. So Cwmni Bro Ffestiniog, like as I said, we got together in 2019. So it's a partnership of 14 social enterprises in the area. We employ over 150 people, and as well as the social and benefits we bring, there's also an obvious economic. A lot of the work we do is through trading and not through grants. So these are some of the social enterprise. Cellbi, which is a community cinema, Antistiniog, the mountain-bike centre I talked about earlier, Gizda, which works with young people, homeless young people, Penguern, which is a community-owned pub, the school, central to everything we do, Seren, who run a community hotel. So there are 3 hotels, a cinema, a pub, and the only Welsh language opera company in the whole world. So there's a mix of social enterprises. So anyway, long story short, top there is the Blaenau Ffestiniog. It was built during the gold or the slate rush. So there are all these properties along the high streets, and these are some of the properties we purchased last year, which is the old co-op, which we're going to hopefully develop into a community bunkhouse to the right, Ephraim and Bolton Cafe. So we've had some levelling up funding to develop these, take the devil's money to do God's work, as they say, and we'll be developing these over the next year. These will be business units and accommodation for young people above and workshops below, and a community-owned bunkhouse next door, which will also act as emergency accommodation for homeless young people. We've bought a hardware store in the town that was closing. This is all through Antistiniog, the community mountain-bike centre. A hardware store in the centre of town, which was closing. It was a going concern. It's one of them shops you go into to buy a washing line and come out with 2 tubs of paint. It's the kind of shop everyone needs in their community. So a local family now live above the shop as well. So this was going to close and be turned into a house, but yeah, we got a loan to purchase it, and now it's a going concern. It's a good little business. To the right, we've bought a community centre last year, which we're developing this year. That will be developed and run by young people. Young people need space within their community, so we're really excited about this. I would have preferred to negotiate with Mr. Earth himself rather than the committee of the Earth to purchase this building, but we finally got there. We've also got some funding to develop this over the next year. So it's all about community-led economic development. We've used tourism as a lever to spark some of these enterprises. So it's about small private enterprises, as you were talking, and social businesses working together. It's about dependence, independence, or interdependence. But what's the role of community, local authority, and governments? You know, is it a level playing field, i.e., you know, the investment that goes into Zipworld and Surf Snowdonia compared to some of the micro businesses or social enterprises? You know, Surf Snowdonia received 8 million in public funding. It's now closed, made a loss of 1.5 million every year while it was open. You know, that's ridiculous. And, you know, honestly, you know, a 10-year-old in our village said, you know, looking at Stolgerog, Surf Snowdonia, does it make sense that you use electricity to make waves? Shouldn't you use waves to make electricity? You know, an inland surf lagoon, you know, how crazy is that, really? Anyway, are we brave and honest enough, you know? Anyway, so here's where we are now, Cymru curve. So we've moved the we've looked at the model of Cymru Brofistiniog and done a wider Gwynedd approach. So there are 25 social enterprises and businesses in Gwynedd. We did a quick calculation. You know, 553 volunteers, 560 employees. These volunteers are usually directors, skilled people who want to give back to their community. Turnover of 14 million and assets worth over 43 million, right? That speaks the language of local authority and government as we look to have a level playing field regards the kind of investment that our work really deserves. Lots of these social enterprises are made of community pubs, hotels, hostels, cafes, mountain bike centre, bike hire, cinema, galleries, stuff that will appeal to your tourists. So the idea is that we come together. We've just employed 6 people through Cymru Curve, and one of these will be looking at sustainable and community-led tourism. So we'll be looking at that over the next 12 months. We're not, you know, social business, small private businesses play just as much an important role as social businesses. They act like social businesses. These micro businesses, they employ locally and raise families locally and invest locally. The issue is with the investment that's given into these big multinationals that move in, that's where we have an issue. So I brought this up because there was a Welsh Government consultation on tourism in 2021. What can be achieved at community level in delivering the government's priorities? Surely the question should be, what can be achieved at government level in delivering the community's priorities? And yeah, so I love this photo. To the left here is, to finish, the mountain in the back there is where the mountain bike trails come down and the old quarry owner's office. Our mountain bike centre is just there, and these 3 young lads looking into the future, they probably worked in the quarry. And to the right, there are 2 young lads about a week ago sitting on site in the mountain bike centre thinking about what they're going to do in the future. But I just love their faces, their smiles and their confidence. So the idea is yeah, let's build a better kind of economy, inclusive, and yeah, sorry, I'm rambling now.
Oh, not rambling at all, Kerry. Absolutely fantastic. Really great run through, not only of your work, but of some really key questions, and absolutely, you know, brave and honest about the reality of some of the arguments, and, you know, a whole, you know, really radical case made very clear there. And by all means, not the whole of Wales is persuaded, but it just makes so much sense, doesn't it, to see tourism really creating benefit and well-being in a local area, and that kind of radical community involvement and sense of ownership. Just incredibly exciting. And yeah, interesting to see you put it in the metrics that you know, traditionally tourism is supposed to serve, you know, in terms of those economic metrics. Some really great questions you asked at the beginning there about where does that money actually go, all that money that we talk about in the tourism sector. And great to see that in doing tourism right and doing these radically innovative and at the same time painfully obvious things, you're making such a positive impact economically and environmentally and in terms of the well-being of the whole community. Absolutely fantastic to hear about. So thank you, and I'm sure people will have questions and reflections on what you've said, so please hang around for that and we'll come to questions and reflections from the floor, but plenty of chat in the chat feed as well. Thank you, Kerry, brilliant. In the interest of time, we'll move straight on to our third panelist. Anke Wintenbach is a national judge for Green Key, which is a sustainability standard, environmental responsibility standard for tourism, and also has worked with the New Economics Foundation and has some really great academic insights and expertise as well from further afield than Wales. So we're bringing in that kind of more international perspective now. Anke, we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, and it's really exciting to follow Nigel and Kerry on what they talked about, like the practical examples, but all the bigger issues really facing Wales. So I hope I can contribute to many of the topics that have been actually mentioned. Answering the question, is there a new and achievable path to successful tourism? And I would say, yes, there is. And I'm going to give some examples. So just briefly about me. So I'm a senior lecturer, one of the colleagues of Nigel. So we're seeing each other quite often. I'm a sustainability consultant working freelance, worked at the New Economics Foundation before, and I come from the industry. So hopefully bring a good mix here. Came to academia quite late. What I'm interested in is also social impact. So well-being economy, I've been involved quite a lot, measuring and improving well-being. And my main focus areas are really fair and dignified work, sustainability, and coastal and rural tourism development and resilience. Great. So yeah, so when I was invited, I thought, okay, I give two ideas. I shared two ideas, even though I had plenty of ideas, towards an industry that focuses on creating value for local communities. Because really, residents measure tourism in the social, economic, psychological benefit it brings to communities. Very much what Kerry described, like if it doesn't benefit us, it doesn't make much sense. And really the aim should be to foster a resilient and regenerative tourism product and tourism area. And also it should be really a shift towards values. I think that came out quite strongly out of Nigel's and Kerry's talk, like it should be, the focus should be on values alongside visitor numbers, and certainly not the other way around. So I'm talking about the tourism for the common good as an idea. Also has much less indicators than, for example, the current strategy, and then related to that, fair and decent work. So from TINA to tapas. So TINA stands for there is no alternative, kind of having this state of, oh my God, it's also horrible, and we have over tourism or not enough tourism in some areas. So there is no alternative to a mindset which says tapas, which means there's plenty of alternatives. Yeah. So here we have examples, and I know you guys talked about donut economics before. So economy for the common good, I'm going to talk about, which is related to donut economics, to solidarity economy, circular economy, degrowth, post-growth. So that is one way of looking at it. And here, just a quick overview what ECG is. So it's ECG. What matters really is a focus here on who matters is all stakeholders. So it's not only the few organizations working in tourism, but actually everybody. And that is employees, investors, suppliers, customers, but also the wider community and society. And what matters is really guided here by ethical values. So values in a common good idea are human dignity, solidarity, and social justice. That very much resonated with me listening to Kerry's talk just now. Like that is really solidarity lived with all the people involved. Environmental sustainability and transparency and co-determination. So the community decides what they actually want the tourism to look like, and they're actually taking ownership of it. So it really is the idea that any activity should serve the common good. And I think Carrie's example is a prime example of that. So focus is here on that, and ECG is a global movement, so quite active and growing. I've been part of developing the measurement framework. So I know Christian Felber, the founders. So it's a really bunch of energetic people, and they're also part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, so of the wider Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Just trying to move on here. Yeah, so this is how an economy for common good balance sheet looks like. And I'm not going to talk through this in much detail. I just want to give you an idea. Everything, by the way, is open source. So this can be applied by anyone. You can take it and run with it, which many organizations do. So here you have your stakeholders on the left column, and then in the first row you have your values, and then you have 20 themes, if you like, talking, for example, about solidarity in the supply chain, talking about human dignity in the workplace, talking about self-determination, co-determination, and so on. So we don't have enough time to go into that, but I'm very happy to go into detail for people who are more interested. So now the relationship to tourism. So this has been applied in many contexts. Often actually small and micro businesses have applied it, plus some municipalities, and increasingly larger organizations are interested in applying this framework. The federal state of Bavaria in Germany has recently made a first attempt to translate the matrix, the ECG matrix, for tourism. And that is very brave. It's not perfect, and I'm not quite sure about it, but I would like to present it because it's a first of its kind, and I'm just giving you some examples here how that could look like. So for example, when we talk about human dignity and the supply chain, A1 here, you could say, for example, human dignity amongst service providers and the regional economy. So there's a clear link here. It's not detached, or solidarity amongst the people in the region, which is again what Carrie just described. So keeping the supply chain local. That is ways of measuring that, to say, how can we actually achieve that? So when I worked at NEF, I worked with local economic factors to see how far money travels, where's the leakage. And these are relatively easy to apply ideas, and I think they're quite intuitive. Here you have somebody mentioned in the chat, for example, it's not about only employees, but it's also about visitors. So here we have employees and human dignity. So we're looking at ethical behavior towards employees, but also towards visitors. So do we treat them with respect? Do we cater for them or care for them? Sharing public spaces and so on. So again, like this is, I'm very happy to share the slides. This is an idea that is currently rolled out across Bavaria, which is the biggest tourism region in Germany. And I think that's a very brave thing. And I think it's worth having a look and seeing how that resonates with people and how it's been applied. For example, Amsterdam developed this impact action program, including tourism. So since then, there's actually saying very clear, we don't want stag-do's and hen-do's, we want a different kind of tourists. Economy for the Common Good has been part of this together with Donut Economics and B Corps. So there has been a joint effort picking the best bits of each of these frameworks, which I think is fantastic. So you don't need to buy into one. You can actually say, actually for us, a bit of donut, a bit of economy for the common good, and that is what we want. So there's regions, which might be good as an example. Unfortunately, there's very little in English. Kufstein is a big tourism region in Germany. So the Wilder Kaiser region, for example, applied ECG. Regensburg Tourismus, Regensburg Tourism. Regensburg is a big tourism draw, very famous for their heritage and castles. They won an award. So that reminds me, people said, like, how about we focus on sustainability and become famous for it. These sort of activities can put people on the radar. That's been across the media in Germany because it's new, it's interesting, it's exciting. So that's how you make some noise. And as I said, Bavaria is currently actually rolling out Economy for the Common Good training across the whole federal state. And that is a concerted effort. There's a couple of consultants involved, but the tourism businesses are queuing for these workshops, and which is very, very reassuring. So results, what happens when you apply this? Staff motivation is improved, corporate reputation enhanced, greater sustainability in the supply chain, and higher levels of customer trust and loyalty. So if that would become your brand, sustainability, that might be something to consider. And just quickly, I'm aware of time. One of these areas I talked about is, for example, dignified work, which is one of my main research areas in hospitality employment. And I recently hosted a symposium where we had the Work Foundation presenting, and it's quite shocking, really, results from this year, like 36% of hotel and restaurant workers in England experience severely insecure work. There was no data on Wales. I don't think that will be much different in Wales. So very little, so that was financially insecure. And then other studies, again, no England, no Wales, no Northern Ireland data, show severe lack of fair work in hospitality and employment. And here we're looking at fair pay, fair conditions in terms of health and safety, ill treatment, fair contracts or contracts at all. Many people don't have contracts. Dignity and respect. So there were reports of sexual harassment up to rape. So quite severe. Lack of dignity and respect, and being able to unionize and actually negotiate. So these studies from Ireland, Scotland, Norway, and Australia, undertaken by the Global Hospitality Alliance, where I'm part of, these are the suggestions from workers, what can be done. So maybe doing a similar study or taking these recommendations from workers on board, because they know what they want, and they know what they need. And there is no sustainable tourism product and no sustainable tourism destination if we can't look after the employees, because the shortage will only continue if we're treating people with the undignified and disrespect. So better working hours, work-life balance, better management. Here, Nigel touched on that, better perception of hospitality work. That is not a low skill, low pay industry, but actually a career where people can progress, zero tolerance for abuse, and so on. So ideas, I'm trying to bring in a couple of ideas from other projects, from other areas. Maybe that can spark some inspiration for people. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your comments, to hearing your feedback, and maybe these could be part of an achievable path for sustainable tourism in Wales.
Thank you, Anke. Thank you for your insight there, and really, really useful. And, you know, as Nigel touched upon at the beginning, you know, that importance of young people having careers in the tourism sector, and the issue of fair work and making sure that it's the kind of work that promotes people's well-being is really important. And great to see those frameworks in use in Germany and elsewhere in Europe, and to share insights across countries. And of course, here in Wales, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act gives us a framework, and what you've provided there, you know, around the metrics and how we judge and measure what an economy for the common good might look like is all super relevant. So thank you, Anke, for your contribution to tonight's discussion, which is shaping up to be really fascinating. And I am concerned about time, because I know there'll be lots of comments from the room as well, which I'm hoping to allow enough time to do justice to. Thank you, Anka, for your presentation. And now on to our final panelist of this evening, and that's Ian Tweedale, who is an expert guide on the Wexford Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way. And Ian is going to talk to us about pilgrimages and a new movement in tourism, which sounds very exciting. Ian, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Over to you.
No problem. It's lovely to see other folks from Pembrokeshire as well. Hello, Emma, and we've got Jeremy and others. So good to see us there. So that's great. Yeah, so my day job, by the way, I've just taken on a new role, which is the manager of Coldy Island, which is a monastic island off the Pembrokeshire coast. And I've been really interested to hear what's been said tonight, because I think we're going to implement some of these things there. So, but that's for another evening. So what I want to talk about tonight is what we've been doing on the new pilgrim path called the Wexford Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way, which goes from, it's an international one, it goes from Ireland, County Wexford, then down the north coast of Pembrokeshire to St David's, from Fishguard to St David's. So in the context really of the wellbeing economy. So let me sort of get into that. So first of all, and I think I saw it on one of the comments in the chat as well, about someone asked about pilgrimage. It's one of the fastest growing sectors within the tourism economy, and it's quite different to other things in normal tourism, for example, in that it's really a journey with an intention. So often people take part in a pilgrimage because they're going through a sort of time of personal change. It might be they've just finished a course, or they've just broken up with someone, or they're dealing with a health issue, or all sorts of things. So lots and lots of different sort of major things in life. But at the heart of that, well-being is very much connected to it in a personal way. And I'll come on to the economic bit of well-being in a bit, but it's very much about the personal to start with. So, and what we're seeing is it's also about a journey of spiritual awakening as well for a lot of people. But what's really interesting is that this is an awakening of spirituality away from religious institutions that have tended to sort of dominate this area over the last hundreds of years. And it's particularly popular with the nones, which is the people who would maybe classify themselves as spiritual but not religious. And that's quite a big, huge demographic, a really important demographic that we've seen. And I think that the importance of some of these things is being seen now that there are well over 200 pilgrim routes in the UK that have been reinvented or reimagined or rediscovered, or completely new, where no sort of historical pilgrimage routes used to exist. And the thing that really kick-started all of this was the Camino de Santiago in Spain. Now, we tend to think of that as being something that's been going on for hundreds of years, and it sort of has, but actually it became popularized and rediscovered in the 1980s by the Galician government. And that was an economic development project where they kick-started it, invested quite heavily in local accommodation. But before then, in 1982, there were only a few hundred people doing it a year. Now there's 500,000 a year. We can talk about whether or not that's too many, and I think it possibly might be. So what we're also interested in is places that you can go and have a pilgrimage experience where it's not like Glastonbury on the hoof, you know, it's a little bit quieter. So how is it different to regular tourism? I think this is something where it's been quite interesting in the work we've been doing with the British Pilgrimage Trust and the Pilgrim Paths Island, which is their equivalent in Ireland. We've found that when we've engaged with tourism agencies, they've found it quite difficult to get their head around pilgrimage, because when you walk a long way, it has psychological impacts, it has physiological impacts, and it has spiritual impacts. And tourism agencies find it quite difficult to grasp that, because they're about destination marketing and they're about sort of node marketing on the route. So the idea of the walk itself being the thing that matters, not the places that you're going to, is a new concept. And I think that idea of walking is very, very important. And it's also very relevant in the wider well-being economy. So in addition to personal well-being, it's very important. We've done a lot of research on this, and there's been a lot of sort of academic research done on it. It's green. It's that you travel on foot and you buy public transport, so you're not driving into a place in a car. Also, we found that pilgrims spend on average about 3 times more in the local area than regular tourists do. So in other words, they're in the area for longer, if it's a longer route. They're buying food locally, they're staying locally in different types of accommodation, and they're there for a much longer period. Also, one thing that I do want to stress as well is that those pilgrims often come from outside of the area too. And so, for example, this weekend I've got a group from Ireland coming over to Pembrokeshire. 2 weeks ago we had a group of 25 people from the US doing this route. So it's beginning to really sort of get some traction in terms of international markets as well. But also it connects people when you're immersed in the local, in this case, on the glorious Pembrokeshire coast path. You can't help but be immersed and subsumed within the tides and the different time and this time of the year, the seals and all that sort of stuff. So the natural environment connects with people in a way that is quite amazing. So let's move on to the next one. So what we've done is we've created a replicable model to establish sustainable pilgrim routes. And by going off and working with a best practice team, we brought a team together from the British Pilgrimage Trust, Journeying, that I'm a director of as well, Pilgrim Paths Ireland, and another company called Guided Pilgrimage. And we basically developed a methodology for doing the research, route planning, getting accommodation partners involved, very much involving communities on the route where they each own the stage that goes through their community. Waymarking, marketing, websites, social media, passport stamps, certificates, and also a sustainable business model that can continue afterwards. So we've done what normally takes in a sort of, these things are normally established by very enthusiastic volunteers, and it normally takes about 5 years to get one of these things up and running. And we've managed to do that in 18 months across 2 countries in this route. And that's quite useful. And it's a way in which local authorities and tourism agencies can commission people to do this if they want one. And a lot of organisations are wanting one now because of the moment that pilgrimage is happening, is having right now. But also there's tensions as well between tourism agencies and those sort of local authorities, because they don't quite get what pilgrimage is, the process of walking, that journey. They get the idea of all the marketing and the other stuff, but it's what happens to you in the process of walking. I always call it a 3-day effect. After about the first 2 or 3 days on a pilgrimage, you're thinking and you're chatting about all the things that, you know, your family, your home, your work, and your busyness, your priorities, your to-do lists, and all that sort of stuff. By day 3, something clicks in your head, and usually by the end of day 3, you sort of, a different part of the brain kicks in that's much more connected to the senses and connected to what you're walking through, and you just calm down. And then when you keep walking, it has a remarkable impact. So it's that sort of effect, if you like, that sort of connecting with something bigger than just yourself, that what really pilgrimage is. It's not about necessarily, it's nice to go to lovely places, of course, but it's that process in your head and getting down into your heart as well. So the Wexford Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way is about 195 kilometres, including a sea crossing. It's been commissioned by, I won't read them all out, it's been commissioned by those organisations. And we did a lot of research to look at the ancient Celtic saints, if you like, who were very much on that route and the stories that connect them. We did a lot of academic research to look at those stories as well, but also it's very much about engaging with storytelling, music, poetry, art, and that's the sort of thing in the Celtic countries as well that we really do excel at. And little examples of that when we have meals in nice restaurants and so on, where we have people playing music. So in Ireland, we go to storytelling houses. In Wales, we have people who will sort of sing for us and tell us poems and speak poetry and all that sort of stuff. It's those cultural things, and I think Nigel talked about this as well, that really sort of bring the sort of whole experience up. I will whiz through all of this. What we've done is we've also done some interesting digital waymarking stuff and audio guides. We've got an app that loads automatically. You don't have to look at it. It just fires up and you get my dulcet tones telling you what you're looking at. So you can just sort of walk along. And if you don't have a guide to go with you, you're just doing it on your own, then you can have this audio guide, a virtual guide in your pocket. And then on the way, there are sort of interesting places that we sort of talk about in that sort of example of the audio guide. This is a fairy fort in Ireland. I haven't got time to talk about fairy forts, but very interesting places. So to summarise, basically, I really do believe that everyone is hardwired for spirituality, and it's at the heart of our personal well-being. And for many, that enables meaning, purpose, connection, relationships, identity, and so on. I think some of these do really map quite well with what Anko was saying about those sorts of dignity issues, about how we can measure these things in a slightly different way, but also the inability to engage with our spirituality impacts on our health, it impacts on education, it impacts on work, it impacts on family life. I was just, there is a new academic sort of subject on spirituality that isn't necessarily tied in with religion, that's becoming quite a big thing, and there's an international network for the study of spirituality and so on. And that awakening of spirituality, wherever it comes from, is really important in well-being. And pilgrimage has also shown really positive impacts on public well-being, in that the sorts of things that we're doing, we're generating sustainable revenues, it has low environmental impact, and it really works for local communities now. So what's next? Do more of these. We've got a model that we can apply to other places. And also, because partly of what I'm doing now in the day job, it's how we utilise in Wales. We have some key places like St David's, we have all the sort of little coastal sort of places on the route, like Holy Wells and so on the Wales coast path, on the Pembrokeshire coast path, and places like Caldy Island, where I'm sort of now based, that sort of are well springs, if you like, of places where people can just take a breath and think about things in a slightly broader base. So that's me. Hopefully it makes some sense, and happy to discuss and share any of those other points.
How wonderful, Ian. I want to do a pilgrimage. That just really sold it to me, and pulled up a really good range of points there about the opportunity to really flourish in that kind of tourism that really does ourselves good, as well as doing the places that we visit some good as well, hopefully in the process. And great to see that you've got this sort of framework for making pilgrimages, replicating them in different places. And I really resonated with your point about community ownership of the stage of the pilgrimage that goes through their community, which did pick up, didn't it, on what Kerry was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, just one other little example there. On Monday, we're going on the Pembrokeshire coast path down to St David's again with a group from Ireland. We stop off at places that are en route, like Mellintry Gwent, which is a woolen mill. When we were there with the previous group, it was a very quiet Monday morning. We had a group of pilgrims going. They spent over £3,000 on stuff that we then shipped back to them. That really did help the local business that day. And it's that sort of very positive form of tourism that I think can really connect into those local communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think you know, we've heard the term community wealth building applied to tourism, and obviously that's key, isn't it? Looking at the supply chains of tourism businesses, and are they buying their stuff from local suppliers, and all the economic benefits of that. But this sort of more radical community ownership and real community involvement seems to me a step further than just community wealth building. But I'm sure there are experts in the room who know more than me about that. So I think we've reached the time of the meeting now where we'd love to hear from others in the room. It's already been mentioned that we've got a lot of great participants this evening, thought leaders and experts in some of this from across Wales, and all of us are experts, aren't we, in our own opinion. So please do share yours. I'd love to see some raised hands and some questions. I noticed in the chat the topic about accommodation, and whether you know, whether panelists and others want to talk about the Airbnb effect, and how can we have a tourism sector that enables us to live in our local places and doesn't hand them all over as tourism accommodation. That came through in the chat as a key talking point. But I'm looking for raised hands and anyone who would like to come in with any thoughts or ideas. Selwyn, I can see your hand there. Are you able to unmute? Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. My question is dead simple. It's a question that I can't get answers to. That there's about 17 million pounds income daily on average that is generated by tourism in Wales. My question is very simple. If we follow that money, where does it actually go? And that's absolutely fundamental to anything about economic benefit to the communities. Okay, people say that the tourism industry is dominated, as far as numbers is concerned, by small businesses. But I suspect that when you look, say, at caravan sites, I looked at some on Anglesey, of 24 within range of benefit, 22 of them are owned by large corporations. That is, our whole history in Wales has been one of extraction. The history of slate, coal, iron, steel, agricultural products. And one suspects that the degree of extraction which the tourist industry represents is also far more significant. But we don't seem to have the research that actually looks at following that money. But obviously, anything which is communitized, that is, if the community owns these resources, then obviously that means that income which is generated by tourism stays locally, multiplies locally. But we desperately need some very straightforward economic analysis of the nature of tourism in Wales.
Thank you, Selwyn. Yes, really key point there, following the money and the extractive nature of much of our tourism sector. Points well made there. Jeremy, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. 4 things I just want to contribute in my 1 minute. We're about to reopen our Tourist Information Centre in collaboration with PAIR, which is the largest tourism information company in the UK. And we'll have a place in that because we've secured it for them. We're also trying to work more closely, Dawn, as you well know, with train services, because we've got two train stations in our little village. And so we want to bring more people coming by train. You can't get more sustainable than that, if only there were trains and drivers to drive them, but there we are. We've been developing tours, both for the general public, but also for the cruise ships. And I know people have mixed feelings about cruise ships, but I can assure you that the modern cruise ships are environmentally pretty good. People go to the toilet, whether they're in a hotel or on a ship. It's what you do with the waste that's generated that has to be managed. And finally, our food festival, and the mantra of which is local, sustainable, nutritional. And so our interest as a Chamber of Trade in Fishguard, Goodwick and North Pembrokeshire is wider than just tourism, although tourism is our largest sector, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I have a feeling that you've probably got lots more thoughts to contribute, so we'll see how the time goes. But it's great work that the North Pembrokeshire Trade and Tourism Organisation does. And I noted that you shifted your emphasis to say that rather than just focusing on businesses and supporting businesses, there's been a slight shift towards focusing on supporting enterprise in the tourism sector, which can then encompass social enterprise and some of those other models we've heard about today.
You've got it, Dawn. I hope one of my colleagues who's on this meeting, who's developing Wellbeing walks with us, might be able to say something.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Cara, I'd love to hear from you. What's your take on what wellbeing economy tourism means?
Yeah, no, I was feeling mindful that Selwyn's question wasn't answered. So I was only going to ask a similar question, really. It's sort of about the impact. I love going on holiday, but I do live and I love going on holiday in Wales. I am one of those people that stay in Wales, but I really struggle now to try and find an ethical place to stay. It's the affordable places are all in displaced community houses that were lived in by the community before. You know, what's happened to our hotels and our traditional B&Bs that were in a house where somebody lived? You know, that it's very hard now to go and stay on holiday without feeling horribly guilty. And in my own community, all our North Pembrokeshire communities, there's many people that can't live here anymore. They've been pushed out. So I do want tourism. I want sustainable tourism. Can the tourism industry help us keep our communities intact and you know, to benefit from the tourism? So a similar question to Selwyn's, I think, but the social side rather than the money side.
Yes, take your point, Cara. Hard to feel good about staying in villages where you feel like no local people can afford to live. And I'm not intentionally not going to the panel for answers to questions, just trying to create space for lots more voices in the room. And maybe we'll come back for some answers if we have time. Marcus, what would you like to say?
A similar question to Cara, I suppose, in many ways, about how do you keep a community together. So a question really for Kerry and the other panelists, but an observation. I was very fortunate enough to live in Capelkerrig for many years and worked there as an outdoor instructor. But we were fortunate enough that we could have winter activities as well as summer activities. A lot of tourist activity in Wales is summer only. I was involved in a tourism generation project in Europe, mostly around the Alps, where they trained up ski instructors as raft guides so that they could have a dual occupation. They were ski instructors during the summer, raft guides during the winter, and during the spring and autumn they did their own thing and enjoyed life. So Kerry, are your other community projects able to sustain employment through the non-tourism season? And are there any other projects where this sort of approach, because until you get full-time employment, there will always be the problems that Anka referred to about low wages, low security, and so forth. It's entirely, well, very largely to do with the fact that it's seasonal work. Kerry, any thoughts from Blind Eye? Lovely to see Blind Eye doing so well. I was delighted.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, a bit of a health warning. We're not kind of reliant on tourism regards the work we do as Cymru Broffestiniog and Antestiniog. We're fortunate the mountain bike centre appeals to head cases in any weather, so they come in any weather to use the trails. So we're not like seasonally dependent. But regards the outdoor activity side, I think, you know, one thing we look at is education. We work with the local secondary school, so the idea that some of the local young people use the site. We have a roundhouse built on one of the jump sites through one of our community projects. We do wellbeing courses there and stuff. So yeah, it's a mix. So I feel a bit of a fraud really talking about that I'm an expert on tourism, because I'm not, from a long stretch of the imagination, but we've got a mix of enterprises. So what we've done in Blaenau really is use the tourism or the mountain bike centre income to create confidence, but also to create revenue. So we have community assets. So, for example, Antistiniog own a mountain bike centre that brings tourists in, or maybe just enthusiasts in mountain bike. But we've used that to buy a hardware store. Do you know what I mean? So and actually, some of the people that work in the mountain bike centre in the summer, when it's really busy, actually work in the hardware store in the winter as well. So some of the young people, the homeless young people or disadvantaged young people, have training in the mountain bike centre on bike maintenance courses. So it's a kind of, I'm making it sound really that it's working. It's very challenging, but the idea is that that we look at the economy as a whole. And one thing we are looking at, there is the rise in the Airbnb and holiday lets. Is it possible that we could maybe, there are a few empty houses here that might only be suitable, that have been renovated, that are only suitable for tourists. Could we purchase one of them, use the income from that to subsidise housing for local young people again? So we're looking at the whole picture in a way. So yeah, I haven't answered your question at all, Marcus. But yeah,
I think.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I think you have actually, and that's a great answer. And I think that point about thinking about the economy as a whole and the way that tourism sector can provide for people's basic needs is sort of beyond and in addition to the arguments about fair pay, which are obviously really important too. Andrea, thanks for your patience. What would you like to say?
Now that I've finally got the hang of raising a hand and lowering it, I will speak now. Thank you to Jeremy for my introduction there. I'm in Fishguard and living here. My father is from this area, my mother's from England, so I've skipped backwards and forwards over the years and always come down to Fishguard and Pembrokeshire in particular to get my head straight and improve my well-being when I've needed to. Now that I live here, I work as a psychotherapist. And I started in COVID doing wellbeing walks, so walking therapy with clients. I'm now extending that to the tourist trade because I'm well aware that many of our visitors come to Pembrokeshire to do like I have always done, to get your head together and to soak up the wonderful area. The whole point of the wellbeing walks that I'm offering is so that people can take Pembrokeshire home with them, and using mindfulness, which they learn through lovely activities throughout their wonderful scenery around here and along the coast path, is they get a chance to soak it up, take it away with them and use it to improve their well-being when they are in their more stressful lives. So it's about getting people to come here and take away nothing but the mindfulness of Pembrokeshire. Nothing else is touched. They don't take pebbles from the beach. They don't do any damage other than soak in the views and get to take it home with them.
Wonderful, really great to hear. Thank you, Andrea. Tara, do come in.
Oh, sorry, wasn't expecting so quick. I guess I just wanted to add something that I heard from another tourism researcher who lives in Swansea. I was hoping he might come tonight. Terence Jones, I think he's called. Works internationally, but it's based in Wales. And we heard from him that an example of sustainable tourism in Croatia, I think it was. Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't. It was part of the well, it was a country in Europe, in Eastern Europe, that suffered from the war. Maybe it was Serbia. Sorry, and they, the government, once the country had recovered some, the government gave money to each community to set up a hotel in that community, which was run by the local people, and it didn't have a restaurant in the hotel, but every night the arrangement would be that a different household in the community who wanted to would feed the people in the hotel, or families from the hotel. So you would go out and have meals in the community. You wouldn't be all isolated and segregated in the hotel keeping all the money. The whole idea was that it was trying to rebuild the local communities and keep income and employment there, and give the visitors a local cultural experience amongst the people in the community. And he often cites that as a way of smaller countries to sort of integrate their tourism into their local culture and spread the wealth outside of one single business. I thought that was really interesting.
And it picks up on Nigel's original points about people actually want that sort of authenticity, whatever that means, but that connection to the local place, that I think is what tourists want, isn't it? So yeah, great example there. Wouldn't it just be wonderful to see more of that happening, you know, across Wales? I think it's been a really great discussion. Nigel, would you like to share any closing thoughts or answers to some of those questions and challenges that we've had, perhaps about where does the money go from Welsh tourism, how much of that does go out to global corporations and how much really goes local? And what about that challenge on accommodation in particular?
Yes, thanks, Dawn. I think it's been a brilliant conversation this evening, actually, and there's so much going on in the chat. You just can't keep up with it, can you? Some great questions as well, and comments, you know, and I think where does the money go is a critical one. I was just putting a few comments in the chat, really. I think there is research on this, and you know, it's Oxford Economics and some of the big global consultancy companies produce a lot of the research. It would be good to get research which is a little bit more local and a bit more nuanced, rather than taking a model which is you know, globally sort of applicable and then just trying to crunch Wales into it. You know, because we're very different, and you know, like I was saying at the beginning, we've got a lot of small businesses, micro businesses, and that's the real strength of what we've got here in Wales. You know, we don't have the big Hiltons and the Marriotts and you know, these big hotels, and you know, some people would see that as a weakness, but what that means is that the money is more likely to circulate locally. And I think the more we can work on that multiplier and retaining a bigger percentage of that money here in Wales, the better. I mean, Ian's example of Irish tourists buying woolen blankets from the woolen mill is a great example. You know, high quality products that the people will spend money on that benefit local businesses and craftspeople here in Wales. So I think, yeah, that, you know, where does the money go is really critical. Obviously, big caravan parks around Benllech are not really doing anybody any favors. People don't tend to then generate a lot of income from the area because they bring a lot of their own food and stuff like that with them. You know, what we want is not necessarily more tourists, but people who are actually going to put money into the local economy. I just wanted to take a bit of a moment just to go off on a sidetrack and just kind of say that, you know, tourism is not just about affluent people coming from the southeast of England. You know, tourism also offers subjective well-being opportunities for people who are excluded from so many aspects of life that many of us take for granted. You know, friend and colleague of mine has done some work with refugees who've been able to take holidays in Wales, huge benefits in terms of their subjective well-being and what they've got out of it. So, you know, tourism does actually give a lot of personal well-being as well as broader economic well-being. And then just finally on the accommodation, I've left that till the end because I think that's the most difficult question to answer, really. You know, that the whole debate around second homes in Wales is a hugely controversial debate, isn't it? And it's much bigger than Airbnb, and it's much bigger than second homes. I think, you know, we've got to find a balance between you know, opportunities for people to come and stay, but not hollowing out our communities. And, you know, I know this as well as anybody because I spent a lot of time on Anglesey, which are there, you know, communities which are then completely dead in the middle of winter, and no schools and no shops and no facilities for local people. You know, so yeah, that is a huge issue, and we've got to try and find a way to create a balance there. But yeah, it would be lovely to keep the conversation going, actually, to be honest, Dawn. And you know, I think my personal kind of view, because I'm got a vested interest in it, is I think, you know, a successful tourism industry, and how we define that, is hugely linked to a well-being economy. You know, I don't think successful tourism can't work without it benefiting communities, individuals and society here in Wales.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating discussion, and thank you for concluding it so strongly, Nigel, with those important messages. And like you, I feel like this is a conversation that certainly needs to continue. And we haven't been able to do justice to all the nuances this evening, but certainly some fantastic content and contributions from our panelists and contributors in the room as well. Some clear pathways forward, some really great shining examples of wellbeing economy tourism, and some new ways of thinking about it, which we hope will echo into the corridors of power for those that set tourism strategy for Wales and make those big decisions about tourism investments. If only they could hear more strongly from people like Kerry and others in the room who are really blazing a trail for how tourism should be done and could be done, and developing Wales into the kind of destination that we think is good for the future and good for nature and good for all of us. I think Wales has it all within its gift to create a tourism sector, perhaps not more visitors, but visitors who have a more positive impact. Economically, environmentally, socially and psychologically, and all those other metrics about how we measure success. It's been really such a key theme this evening, and something we're really passionate about exploring further at Wellbeing Economy Cymru as well. So we hold these forums monthly. We will be regrouping next month to talk about change making and activism in Wales in partnership with the Youth Climate Ambassadors. So a totally different topic, but the same core theme, which is how we can work together to support the emerging wellbeing economy across Wales and really grapple with some of these key challenges as we have been trying to do this evening. Thank you all for participating and for contributing and listening. I hope you found it as interesting as I have. I'm going to invite you all to unmute yourselves and say goodbye, and then I'm going to end the call. But thank you to our panelists for your contribution, and thank you all of you for being here. Please unmute, say goodbye, and go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a lovely evening.
Yeah.